Maybe we can start slowly because we already started to speak. So Marta, I guess you can start.
Okay, so hello, good morning, everybody. I think it's just 1 minute after 1:30, so I think we can start our event on strategic technologies for European platform, and the event takes 15 minutes. And first of all, I would like to thank you, all of you who joined today to our webinar. My name is Marta Krutel, and I represent Polish National Center for Research and Development office in Brussels. And before we start, I have few housekeeping announcements. The event will be recorded and streamed on YouTube, and I hope all of you agrees. And also, after two presentations today, we'll have Q&A session. And I really encourage all of you to ask questions via chat, and we'll try to answer at least some of them. And also, we have a habit that all organizers say hello in their national languages. So I will switch into the Polish language. Dzień dobry Państwu, nazywam się Marta Krutel i reprezentuję Biuro Narodowego Centrum Badań i Rozwoju w Brukseli. Serdecznie Państwu dziękuję za dołączenie do dzisiejszego spotkania tak licznie. Mam nadzieję, że spotkanie będzie bardzo owocne dla Państwa. Zachęcam do zadawania pytań na czacie, który będzie miał miejsce po dwóch prezentacjach i życzę jeszcze raz owocnego spotkania. Now I will switch into the English language, and I would like to give the floor to Maya. She will say a few words in her national language. Maya, floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome also on behalf of Slovenian Business and Research Association. Dobrodošli vsi skupaj. Me veseli, da ste se udeležili v tako velikem številu in da je tudi kar nekaj udeležencev iz Slovenije. Hvala tudi mojim kolegom iz bruseljskih pisarn za tole soorganizacijo. Upam, da boste izvedeli veliko koristnih informacij, ki vam bodo koristile tudi pri vašem nadaljnjem delu. So back to English, just thank you so much everybody again for joining us, and thank you for all my colleagues here in Brussels-based offices for another great event. And now I give the word to Orsolya.
Jó napot kívánok, szeretettel üdvözlöm Önöket, különösen a kollégáimat az Eötvös Loránd Egyetemről. Én itt a brüsszeli irodában, vagy a brüsszeli képviseletet viszem egymagam eltét képviselve. Reméljük, hogy informatívnak és hasznosnak fogják találni az itt elhangzott információkat. Hello, good morning, or good afternoon. My name is Orsolya Lugmaier and I represent Eötvös Loránd University in Brussels. I hope you find this event informative and useful for your future plans. And then I give the floor to Agota.
Thank you so much, Orsolya, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm another Hungarian co-organizer representing the National Research Development and Innovation Office of Hungary here in Brussels, sitting at the Perm Rep. Mindenkinek jó napot kívánok, aki Magyarországról belehallgat ebbe a mai eseménybe. Egy kicsit rendhagyó a mai témaválasztásunk, mert nem csak kutatás fókuszú, de egyértelmű kutatási vonatkozásai vannak a témának, ezért reméljük, hogy minél többen el tudtak jönni és meghallgatják ezt. So thank you, everybody. I will join you back as the moderator of the Q&A session, but now I give the floor to Tadas, who is the virtual host of the event.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tadas Tumenas, and I'm the head of Lithuanian R&D Liaison Office in Brussels. And now I would like to switch to my mother tongue and greet Lithuanian participants. Laba diena, dėkoju, kad prisijungėte prie Lino biuro ir partnerių organizuojamo webinaro apie Europos strateginių technologijų platformą. Ir šią naują komisijos iniciatyvą yra siekiama sustiprinti ir panaudoti esamas ES priemonės siekiant naudos investicijoms į strateginės sritis ir ypatingos svarbos bei besiformuojančias technologijas susijusias su žaliąja ir skaitmeninė pertvarka. Todėl linkiu informatyvaus renginio ir tikiuosi, kad išnaudosite šią progą tiesiogiai paklausti komisijos atstovų jums rūpimų klausimų. And now I'm switching back to English. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our today's speakers. And according to the agenda, we're supposed to have only one speaker, but actually we're going to have two. So it's a big pleasure for us to have David Lombardo, Deputy Head of Unit from DG Budget. And later on, his colleague Angelo Villa, Deputy Head of Unit from DG RTD, will also talk about the STEP. So as I recall, David, you will be the one who is going to start, right?
Yes, that's right, Tadash. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon to all, and thank you for the invitation. As you mentioned, my name is Davide Lombardo. I am the deputy head of the newly established task force for the implementation of the STEP initiative. This task force indeed sits in DG Budget, which is my my Directorate General of origin. I am glad to be here because a key role of the task force that, as I say, has just been launched is indeed to interact with the project promoters, to help them identify the best sources of funding in the landscape of the EU budget for these projects that are in these critical and strategic sectors, which we will discuss. I also will, the task force will also help the member states and implementing authorities that carry out programs in shared management to navigate through the regulatory landscape and do the best of this initiative. So I will start the presentation. I don't know if I have control of it or if okay. So someone else is helping
I have
me.
control of it. So
okay, fantastic. Okay, I'll
next.
Okay. All right, so just for by the way of introduction of this initiative and consequently of the new task force, you might have heard a few days ago the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, singling out the STEP initiative as a key part of the EU's response to the national economic and national security imperative to preserve a European edge on critical and emerging technologies. So the idea at the beginning of time, or like late last year, was to establish a sovereignty fund that would help advance the European content in strategically critical technologies. However, upon reflection, it has been decided to propose the STEP initiative, which has the characteristic of relying on existing funding instruments, existing EU programs, because this is going to make it much easier and faster to provide the support that we want to provide. It would have taken, by experience, too long to establish a completely new fund. So the STEP, which again is an acronym that stands for Strategic Technologies for Europe platform, as I say here, boosts, leverages, and steers the existing programs, EU programs, several of them, to deploy support to strategic and critical projects in the area of deep and digital technologies, which I think is what is the main topic of today, with also with my colleague Angelo. But also the STEP will support clean technologies and biotechnologies. And here I have just collected a few examples to give an idea of what these technologies are. But I would like to stress that in the proposal, these are presented precisely as examples. There is no intention to present at this stage an exhaustive list of technologies that can be supported, but the idea is that the technologies will have to be disruptive or critical, including from a strategic autonomy perspective, for them to qualify for support from this new initiative. And as far as the digital sectors or the digital technologies are concerned, here I have listed electronics, quantum, cloud, and edge computing, artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, as well as robotics and 5G and higher and other advanced form of connectivity. But as I say, this is not an exhaustive list. Next slide, Tradas, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the STEP initiative, or the STEP proposal, I should say, which is, by the way, currently being negotiated, if you wish, discussed and negotiated between the Council and the Parliament, the EU Parliament, European Parliament, has three main planks, three main components. It aspires at focusing the existing programs. It proposes the reinforcement, the budgetary reinforcement of a few of them, and also it creates some tools to develop and exploit synergies across these programs. So when it comes to focusing, what we mean is that the proposal foresees that for several instruments like the cohesion policy, the RRF, Digital Europe, and EU4Health, in the basic regulations of these programs, additional objectives and or windows are being added to cater specifically to these sectors that I mentioned earlier. In terms of targeted reinforcement, the proposal requests additional resources for InvestEU, for the Innovation Fund, for the European for the European Innovation Council, and for the Defense Fund, for the European Defense Fund, and I will discuss this a bit later. And I now would like to describe the synergies, which is really the core work of my task force. So first of all, we will develop a so-called sovereignty portal. So we aspire at creating a web-based platform where we gather and centralize all the information about calls and procurements from EU funds, not only from the funds or the programs that the Commission directly manages, because this is already available, but also for the programs that we implement through our implementing partners, in particular the member states when it comes to cohesion programs and the recovery and resilience facility. So, so this will be a first task that we have. Then another form of synergy is in the form of a sovereignty seal. So the legislation foresees that the projects which apply to a directly managed program by the Commission and which are assessed as passing some minimum quality thresholds receive a sovereignty seal, which is a bit like a label or a stamp that would then will make it easier for these projects to receive complementary or funding from other EU programs. In particular, the idea is from the programs that are managed by the member states and other implementing partners. And we can discuss if there is interest how this might work. Then there is this one-stop shop, which is indeed the task force that I discussed was set up in July. The idea would be to support both the project promoters on one side, as I mentioned, but also the implementing partners and the national authorities on the other. And finally, we are also looking at adjusting the state aid framework, for example, to allow for a bit of a higher aid content for projects which are STEP related and that take place or are implemented in assisted regions. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the slide about the reinforcement, the budgetary reinforcements, which the proposal requests. So in total, the proposal seeks about 10 billion of additional funding, which are split across different programs. 3 billion for InvestEU, 2.6 for the European Innovation Council, which Angelo would talk about, 5 billion for the Innovation Fund, and 1.5 billion for European Defence Fund. These top-ups, as we call them, are meant to then support a much bigger amount of investments through the leverage effect. For example, the InvestEU, the EU additional money would back a bigger guarantee, and the guarantee in itself will then back 10 times as much investment. Typically, these are the typical estimates that we see in the past implementation of the InvestEU. The proposal, importantly, also introduces some incentives for member states to devote more of their resources to STEP sectors, both in the cohesion policy and in the RRF. So, for example, with respect to the cohesion, the idea is that the sovereignty seal, as I mentioned, would allow member states to directly fund these projects that have been awarded the label. And also there is, it's foreseen that for STEP relevant projects, the member states would get higher pre-financing to the tune of 30%, and also possibly full 100% co-financing by the EU budget. And for the RRF, the idea is that the proposal would allow for a higher share of RRF funds to be implemented through the InvestEU, which would then, of course, allow the member states to take advantage of the multiplying factor of the InvestEU. Next slide. Yeah, this is, I see that this is the part of the presentation that Angelo would do. So if Angelo is with us, yes, I see him. I will give the floor to him to complete the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Davide, and thanks, Taras, for organizing once more. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to explain now a little bit from the DG RTD side what that STEP proposal means for Horizon Europe in particular, because I think for your community, one of the main instruments here of interest is indeed the European Innovation Council. I am the Deputy Head of Unit to this new European Innovation Council at DG RTD, which exists only since May, so we're still very, very much in the baby phase of this unit, but the EIC is not. And I want to first put into context of what you know about the EIC, what Davide has just explained. So if a top up to the EIC is coming from STEP, what does that mean? So now you know that the EIC consists of a pathfinder, a transition pillar, and then the accelerator. When we talk about STEP, we're talking about a top up and actually an own compartment. I'll come back to that in the EIC fund, which is the EIC accelerator. So we are talking about investments, not about grants, but we're talking about investments into scaling up companies. Next slide, please. You also know that there is a budget breakdown, which Davide has already referred to, where the money should come from, the 2.63 for the EIC, and we can come back to that if that is of particular interest to you. Next slide. What are we trying to do and why? In the EIC, you probably know, all of you, that we currently have the possibility under the accelerator to provide grants combined with equity. So this is called the blended finance or equity only investments. And our investment component can go up to 15 million euro. This is for any breakthrough companies which complies with the work program priorities. It can be any breakthrough technology or any breakthrough innovation which has been identified in a work program. And the new compartment would now allow us to have so-called follow-on investments, not only to companies which come from the EIC strand, so which have successfully gone through the pathfinder and the transition pillar, but to any company. So any company which complies with the requirements of the STEP-led criteria which would underlie this new compartment could gain finance from here. We're talking about equity only. As I said, there is no combination of grants needed. And this is for the EIC. The creation of a sovereignty seal, Davide has already explained. This is complementary, so to say, and we would hope that member states pick this up a lot. You play a role in this, because I happened to hear that the Seal of Excellence, which is basically the system under Horizon, which you're also familiar with, the Seal of Excellence is something which is rather successful in some member states. I mentioned earlier already the state Spain that is apparently financing all seals of excellence. So it makes active use of what Davide was explaining, that there's a screening already done and there's kind of a quality label to a specific type of project. And member states can, and in some cases do, finance this very, very largely. But not all of the member states. There are others who don't make use of that at all. And it's up to you to judge with your member state representatives in how far that is actually justified. There might sometimes be good reasons to do so. In other cases, maybe it is just the lack of awareness about this possibility, or just some other reason which is maybe void of a real R&I logic behind it. Next slide, please. So we are going to support the equity only. The range here would be that these are investments which can go up to 50 million to non-bankable companies, SMEs, and then there is a slight bias at this stage here that we would also want to allow small mid-caps in order not to kill certain companies, not just because they have successfully grown in the meantime, while they're going through our investment pipeline. This is a different size. And when I say 50 million, we're talking about what the EIC would provide as, we say, anchor investment, basically, in the process. Because as you know, all the investments which we undertake from the EIC fund, they are kind of anchor investments. This is not the objective. The amount which comes out here is not the final objective. This is the start of a syndication with private financiers, private equity funds, in an investment round, which usually goes much, much higher. So here it could be, I don't know, 100 million, 150, 200 million. We had financing rounds under the current conditions, which went in the range of 100 million altogether, with our maximum investment of 15 million. That depends obviously very much on the company, its management team, not only its technology, but its maturity for the markets, how interesting it is for private investors. So why are we proposing this year? One could say, well, 15 million is a lot, and if the financing round goes to 100 million, that's it. Well, the point is that we still do lose companies a lot to other parts of the world where the pockets are deeper. And when we talk about strategically important technologies, you can just imagine we nurture a company through any tool. Maybe it could come off the structural funds sometimes, or out of the innovation fund, you name it. But we have a European company which comes to the rounds of investments of like 100 million. Will it stop there? No, obviously not. Google didn't, neither did Skype. None of these companies stops there. They have another investment round afterwards before growing into a really mature company. And these are sizes which we cannot cope with under the current SME. And this is the feedback. I come back to that in a minute. This is the feedback which companies give to us. So in order to avoid that the companies which we successfully nurtured, even up to the level of having a first large investment round, would then be forced to go into another part of the world, and potentially even in parts which might be very problematic for us, thinking about strategic technologies. It must not always be the US. It can well be China or other parts of the world. We don't want to allow this. We don't want to allow is not the right word. We don't want to force companies to do this. This would be exactly the opposite of what we want to achieve in terms of technological sovereignty. The fund investments, but you know this already, is complementary to InvestEU, because some people might ask, and I've seen that Davide has explained that there's quite some money going into InvestEU as well. And InvestEU does not only have guarantee products, they also have a venture capital filière, as you know, but that functions very differently. Those are investments of much smaller size into the companies, because the amounts which come from the EIF in most of the cases through InvestEU, they go into funds. They do not go into companies. So in a fund which has an investment strategy for, I don't know, you name it, 5-10 years, and has a certain thematic priority. So this should continue to be possible, and it's also useful to further strengthen that with STEP, but it's a different system. This is not about these large financing rounds we're talking about, where the EIC is indeed and remains the unique instrument which the EU has created in order to make sure that those innovations mature and then stay in Europe. Next slide, please. So this is what I referred to. From the EIC figures, and then also from our market analysis, it is very clear that the companies in Europe, they continue like those which successfully grow. Obviously, if they don't, they will never be in need of a financing round which goes beyond 100 million. But we have those companies, and those are the ones everybody is watching. So again, when we have strategic technologies, these are precisely the companies we want to have here. They make a real difference, not only in terms of economic development for Europe, but also in terms of strategic orientations, strategic autonomy. Capital costs of those companies at that curve, or at that level of the curve of growth, are very, very high. And we are just not in the same league yet. We're getting much better. We're getting really much better, and the EIC is by now the largest equity investor in that area, in that segment of the market. But we're not the only ones. At least I don't want to say it's only the EIC, but also some member state activities. We're getting slowly better, but we're still lagging behind. Certainly the US, and then also there are quite some potent funds in other parts of the world which can be even more problematic than the US. So, yeah, I think the rest I said. Next slide, please. The EIC is facing an oversubscription already now. Here you see some figures which, in my opinion, they forcefully make the point which I was trying to make, that this money is well invested. The success rate of our instrument is in the range of what one would expect for venture capital investments. It is not that everybody goes through, obviously not, but it's also not impossible to obtain our support. The rest I said. Last slide, I think. This is already the thank you. So let me wrap up. Again, we have STEP as a top-up, as Davide said. It would allow larger financing rounds into strategically particularly important technologies, which these are. Davide said this is still to be decided in more detail. But the use of budget in the EIC is a way to pursue this strategic autonomy through strategic technologies now. Because our instrument, as you know, I mean, we have a pretty immediate effect. Once the financing round is out there, the company gets the money. Now we're accelerating our investment process as well, because there have been some hiccups which you're well aware of. But we're accelerating that process. And once the money goes into the market, it has an immediate effect. You know, the company can use it and it can grow. You can basically watch it grow, which is very different from other EU support instruments, including inside Horizon Europe. Thanks a lot for so much, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both of you. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Agota, who is going actually to manage now Q&A part. So Agota. we are in your hands now.
Thank you, Tadas. And up to now, I have a very easy task because we only received one question from the floor. Oh, no, there is a second one. But first, then let me read out loud the first question that arrived. So what is the rationale behind the proposed budget cut of Pillar 2? Although I saw that this slide was quickly turned on. So that is this 800 million euro to the benefit of the EIC. So the main question is that would the step have a distinct focus on dual use technologies, or what is the reason why we should really change the let's say, allocation of funds? Thanks. I don't know who will respond to which question, but I let this to you to decide.
Davide, when I start with the Pillar 2, you can maybe add on if there's anything on dual use you want to still share with us. This argument, obviously, this is everywhere. And this is also one of the difficulties maybe we have, because Pillar 2 and the community behind projects in Pillar 2 understandably still remembers very well that there were other cases not very far from, not in a very far history, where the Pillar 2 had given money to other types of activities, and it was shifted around. So what's the rationale here? I alluded to it already. It's good that you give me the opportunity to explain this, because we often hear that question and we are kind of feeling that we haven't thought this through, or we are like kind of cannibalizing between the pillars. No, I'm only in this unit actually where I am now since 3 months. I've worked on Pillar 2 industrial technologies before. So I know a little bit what I'm talking about, but you judge. So Pillar 2 finances technologies which address societal challenges across all clusters. In particular, the industrial cluster where I was working on, but in all clusters, it's the societal challenges. Now we want to finance strategically important technologies. There's not a big difference. The point is that what we're trying now with STEP is more accentuated. Even though that list you saw of technologies is really wide, you'll struggle to find a technology where you say this is financed or to be financed under Pillar 2, and you would already see it excluded from what Davide presented. So, but just to make that point, this is an accentuation of technologies which Pillar 2 would finance anyway, in our interpretation. Accentuated in the sense that there will be a narrower focus. Strategically important will have to be defined in some way that it does not address all the technologies from Pillar 2. And then there's the sense of urgency, which Davide referred to and which the president has referred to in her State of the Union speech. We're talking about strategically important technologies, and we're living in a world right now, and your dual use question also shows this very much, we're living in a different world. So if we want to have a rather immediate, or at least short-term effect of investments into research and innovation to create and nurture and develop strategically important technologies, we got to choose which instrument is the best to do this in these next 2-3 years. STEP is a step, as Davide said. It can be a sovereignty fund under the next MFF. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. It can be a strategically new orientation of FP10, in which Pillar 2 might have an own cluster, or you name it. I don't know the structures about strategically important technologies. That's when the programming period is over, so 4 years from now. But what until then? Should we just leave everything as it is? Pillar 2 is not very good in producing technology, bringing technologies to the market quickly. There are lots of projects, including the partnerships, which, as you know better than I do, they go up to TRL7 normally, and then we'll have to see what happens. Some areas it's easier because the big companies drive it forward, take clean steel or whatever. In other areas, it's much less obvious. So if we want to have that impact, the EIC is, in our interpretation, the best tool where we can put it. It's a very similar type of technologies, just in an accentuated way, but it's much more direct. And it probably has a larger leverage effect, but that I don't even want to go into. But this is the rationale. So I'm not thinking that we're cannibalizing between pillars at all.
Thank you, great. And maybe then about dual use.
Yes, thank you. Not just to say that the strategic element, this critical aspect from the strategic autonomy perspective, is indeed a key component of this initiative. Is a key driver of this initiative. So I think we cannot say that this would be the step would only focus on dual use. Every project will be assessed on its own basis, on its own merits, but it's indeed the projects will have to have this critical element of, for example, helping us to wean off from dangerous dependencies in this critical sector. So I guess I don't have an answer besides saying that the analysis will be on a case-by-case basis, but we need to remember where the STEP initiative comes from, what are the goals that it tries to achieve, which have a lot to do with supporting our enhancing our strategic autonomy in this critical sector.
Thank you so much. I would have a relevant comment because I could see on the slide that also in the defense fund you would mainly or only finance research related activities. So is it really focusing only on research, these additional funds, or it's just also focusing at?
No, not at all only research. I mean, Davide can complement, but you saw the instruments, the innovation fund, that's very high level.
I only mean the defense fund, sorry. So because on the slide under the defense fund, it was added in the next column that it's meant for research, but maybe it's just because we are talking about research. So it's also a possibility, or it's exclusively research? Only the defense fund, I mean.
I mean, what we are trying to get is the development of new emerging critical technologies. So if you are trying to, if you want to fund, for example, the installment of solar panels, right? This is not STEP. I mean, the solar panels exist, right? And we know what they are. And of course, we are dependent on those. But the installment of solar panels is not something that we do with STEP. We have other programs. Here, what STEP is trying to do is trying to help companies which have a lot of, which have nice new ideas, potentially disruptive, but that they are so uncertain and so risky that, in fact, typically they don't get off the ground. And so we want to increase our capacity to develop these disruptive new emerging technologies in-house in the EU. So it doesn't mean that we don't do the rest, right, with the budget, but the specific initiative is for the development of technologies, if you wish, right? So some ideas that have the potential to have very big implications down the line, but that because of their status, they run the risk of just dying before even being born. So we would like to, or as Angelo said earlier, they might have to go somewhere else to see the light of day. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to. We want to take more. If you wish, we want to take more risks with these technologies, that because then we would like to have them being European rather than having to depend on these new technologies in critical sectors from potentially friendly or unfriendly allies or partners, I should say.
There was actually a very concrete question coming from a company who would like to scale up their bus production, but these are very unique buses, they say. But then such kind of a scale up of production, could this be a good possible candidate for let's say an equity fund from the EU under STEP? Or this is rather for new technologies? So if a technology is not new anymore, then scaling up is not really meant under STEP.
Well, not from the EIC, so much is sure. And the EIC is not the instrument for that. It's for breakthrough, scaling up breakthrough innovation, but in the making, and so not to produce. But for InvestEU, InvestEU is very broad. So now I don't know in which pillars of InvestEU. This top-up, which Davide was presenting, will then eventually be used. The risk finance filière of InvestEU is just one small element of it. There are guarantee instruments. Windows under InvestEU go across the whole market. They go from infrastructure to including production, I'm pretty sure, not the research and innovation window, but the other windows. So this is as much as I can say.
Yeah. I mean, typically, some of these companies may very well be capable of raising also private normal funding. It doesn't have to be, from Europe. From the description that I've seen in the chat, this seems to be a quite established company that might very well have a lot of, they might be able to make a business case for even for private funding. But I wouldn't want to give an answer yes or no. Certainly for two reasons. First, because indeed the specific scope of the STEP initiative is perhaps the most hotly debated of the elements of the proposal. As I said, the proposal is still being, in a sense, negotiated and potentially changed by the Council and the Parliament. So we need to see what, in the end, is that it is adopted. And the second reason is that even if we had the current proposal as if it was approved, it would be not up to me in particular, or to the task force that I represent, to actually determine the eligibility. But we would be reverting. We'll have to see whether in the individual programs that the EU budget proposes, whether they would be eligible. And as Angelo said, one thing that we will do is we will give advice on what is the most appropriate tool, so that that you don't go up the wrong tree, so to say, that you focus your application in the correct or in the most appropriate calls. That's something that we will do, and we will be happy to do as part of our support to project promoters once the initiative is in fact goes live, hopefully even the beginning of the next year.
I'm sure this will be very useful, because it's always the case with new tools that we are a bit lost at the beginning. So then I'm afraid that you will not have a very clear answer for the next question about when submitting the STEP application. Are the details of the application already known? Because you even just said that not even the...
No, I do. Yes, I have an answer, in the sense that in the first instance, there is no such a thing as a STEP application, but there is an application to the individual program. We would do a first assessment of the calls which are already outstanding, to see which ones are relevant for STEP, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the goal of my task force is to centralize all the information about the useful calls or the relevant calls. So we will look at the existing calls. We may try to identify more like some elements in the application form for the future calls that are relevant to STEP. But for the time being, the application depends on which instrument you are trying to tap, and so there is not such a thing as a STEP application, and we will need to the application will need to be following the guidelines and the requirements of the individual fund, which will be pursued.
So this will just be a next step. If you need an additional type of core, or you will use the current instruments in how they are at the moment, just with an additional budget. So this is.
One question would be indeed whether the different programs will organize themselves in a way that they have a very step-specific calls, or whether indeed they would want to have potentially broader calls in which the STEP projects can then apply. So that I don't know. It will need to be discussed. I guess it depends a bit also on the final shape of the scope of the STEP that will be decided. But in any case, I don't think we will get to a situation where the same call the same template will be useful or will be requested for all the different instruments, because they are different, they work differently, they are assessed differently. But certainly one thing that we want to have is what this I mentioned with the CL, that for example, some serious simplification could come about when if you apply for one program and get this label. Then what we would like to see is that in the next application, several processes or several steps will be already kind of automatically completed, so to speak. So there could be skipped to be clear.
Thank you. Then there is a very short question about the focus. So will it be R&I focused or commercialization focused, or both in a way?
I responded to that in the chat already. I quoted
Okay,
it.
sorry.
Both depends on the instruments, as David said. The instruments really cover very different parts of the innovation pipeline, if you want. So both.
Then we could see that in a way the AI data and robotics partnership offered their help. So they would gladly co-create in a way the work program which is relevant to their field, so on the digital part. But there was also a question integrated, so that is there also ambition to also set strategic orientations for something like accelerating AI deployment in Europe? So would that be part of this digital pillar?
I think there's also two elements of response I would give to that, Philip. First of all, the EIC already now is financing breakthrough innovation, and AI or generative AI is part of that. We have the work program 24 coming up. This is just in one illustration. There have been other work programs where AI, I think, has already been covered, but maybe since it's evolving so quickly, generative AI, I think next year is going to be the first time. We'll have a challenge most probably on generative AI and its use or its development in Europe. That said, as you know, the work program is not adopted yet. This is we're not very far from there, so that's why I'm mentioning it. It's I think very likely that we would have such a challenge under the accelerator, but let's see. So yes, it's covered. So now the EIC is for the time being about any breakthrough innovation. So what will happen with STEP? As I said, it's an accentuated way of like the strategically most important technologies. Generative AI, I can see it in there, but that's a crystal ball. And let's wait until negotiations are over. As David said, it's very hard to foresee what the real scope will be in the end. This is the main interest always of the negotiators. So let's see. And then about whether there is any interaction possibilities with the partnership. I know the partnership well, obviously, and I'm happy that that we have it. Your partnership should normally already be in contact with the AI relevant program manager under the EIC. I'm still too fresh to remember all the names by heart right now, but we have a program manager dealing with artificial intelligence. And if that hasn't been the case, then you should reach out or make sure that there's a mutual reaching out to each other. This is something which is usually happening. The PMs reach out to the partnerships in their remit and vice versa.
I might just add something on this because I'm sitting in the ERA forum, and there we have a new initiative that we might set up some guidelines that would also make it, in a way, facilitate the use of AI and especially generative AI. So this is also coming. Of course, this is not about STEP, but something relevant. I think also
in regulatory terms, Ned, if I may say that, I think without being an expert, but I think Europe is pretty much at the forefront of these regulatory developments in regard AI. It's so quick that obviously policymakers can hardly catch up with that pace. But I think we're pretty much advanced, no? So you guys would obviously know much better. But there's nothing right now in STEP which would provide guidelines. It's more the processes you already know.
I can still see some comments on the cluster 2 versus 3 reallocation. So there is a concrete question, if you can elaborate it a bit more, which clusters will be affected and in what percentage, and if it's not defined yet, then when will we have more information about this?
No, I don't think that there's any decision yet about that, what I can tell you, but I want to emphasize again what I said before, and to take the dramatism a bit out of it. Now, this is one of the situations where I claim to know a bit what I'm talking about, and yeah, so it's the same technologies in the end. But no, I don't know for the specific clusters, and I have really no idea, so I don't want to speculate about it. But what concerns the impact on the work programs, because we're talking about a few years now. We're talking about the remaining years under Horizon. So in 2024, there is going to be virtually no impact on Pillar 2. So anybody having projects there, I understand the nervousness of people, virtually no impact. And then there's a very gradual but minimal impact over the remaining years of the program. The amount is not so massive anyway, but this is what I can say. Next year, basically nothing, and then gradually a little bit.
Thank you, great. And there was something around about TRLs. So are you then saying that only projects of TRL 7 to 9 will be funded?
Yeah, that depends a bit which instrument again. So InvestEU has an R&I window, so that is usually, I don't know, it includes 7 to 9, but it's probably not limited to that. But under the EIC, there was already a response by Pim here in the chat, which I have liked as well. The EIC Accelerator, as I said, is these are mature companies which actually go to the market and search for a second round of equity investments. So that TRL level is pretty high. So yeah, 7 to 9, certainly.
Thank you. I think now a new question is just popping up. So when can we expect a decision on the STEP program? What are the chances that it gets approved by the Council and the member states? And maybe David already said that if we are optimistic, it will happen by the beginning of next year, but you might have some more concrete ideas.
What I can say is that the negotiations in the Parliament and the Council have taken two tracks. There is one aspect that has to do with the legislative elements, let's say the technical aspects of the proposal, which have to do, for example, with the flexibilization of the use of the cohesion funds or the RRF, or for example, the expansion of the extension of the eligibility to larger firms in some cohesion programs. This is being discussed and is proceeding relatively fast in the Council and in the Parliament. And then there is the other negotiation part, which is the budgetary implications, which have basically which have taken a different track because they are part of the discussions on the wider review of the MFF, of the multi-year financial framework. And in terms of the amounts of the top-ups, these additions to the programs, those will they will be discussed as a package together with the other requests that have been made, for example, for migration or for Ukraine, for the support to Ukraine, and this will ultimately be decided by the heads of state. It seems like the calendar might be such that they might decide still perhaps in November. So as you mentioned, Agota, it is possible that indeed by the end of the year we have all the decisions falling and the adoptions falling into place. I do want to stress that in a sense, the fact that we have established the task force for STEP in July, before all of these decisions are taken, is a sign that in the Commission we do think that there is a need to ensure that these programs work better together, regardless of whether they are increased or they're expanded. But we feel that there is scope to provide more effective support to the companies, to the project promoters in the EU, and so we intend to work hard to that end, pretty much almost independently of what gets decided. So we will still try to coordinate the programs better. We will try to see whether there are synergies to be caught, or whether we are leaving some gaps in which our companies fall without us noticing. And so in that respect, these kind of conversations that we are having and the other ones have been proposed in the chat, we are open. We are, this is our part of our job, is to identify, with the help of the beneficiaries,
That sounds excellent. Yes.
ways to do better with what we have. We would like to have more, and hopefully they will give us more, because these are important issues. But regardless of whether we get more, we need to find the way to do better. And this is very important also from a longer term perspective. Because, for example, we need to ask ourselves the questions, are these formats for the call too different from one another? I mean, that's a question, right? Maybe we cannot do anything about it right now, but if we come to that conclusion, we need to take note, and we need to have that insight into the cooking stage when we design the next MFF, right? So there is a lot of work that we need to do, which is independent of the outcome of the negotiations. Although, of course, we are defending our proposal very hard, and we invite those that have a say, or those that have a way of getting their voice heard, to also support it, so that we can have these additional resources that, as Angelo explained, we clearly could deploy fairly quickly, given the pent-up demand that our instruments are facing right now.
I think you more or less even responded to the next question about the future, because you are definitely working on the future already now, and these synergies might really end up being used in the next MFF planning. But maybe you have already an idea what the future might be, so that we just continue this step process, or some of you mentioned that, or one of you mentioned that we might rather have a completely separate sovereignty fund, but I suppose this will come up from this whole process at the end.
I think, Agata, as also Angelo said, there is no crystal ball, but I can say, and also if I just look at the speech of the president that I quoted at the beginning of the presentation, everything suggests that the direction of travel is towards a world where these kind of concerns are more and more pressing and more important. So everything would suggest that when the time comes, let's say towards 2025, where the next MFF will begin to take shape, the strategic autonomy and ensuring that we can pursue our goals in a reliable manner, depending on ourselves mostly, will be a key priority. I want to say a top priority. And so therefore, it's quite likely that both the task force that has been set up, but also this step kind of focus, will become a more structural element of the landscape of the EU budget. What does this mean in practice? There will be a fund or no? Will we have the same instruments or no? That we cannot tell. In fact, that is part of the learning that we need to do the next couple of years, the thinking and the learning. So I would say we don't know the shape or the form, but I think we can reasonably expect that this emphasis on this kind of technologies and on the importance to be autonomous is here to stay. for the foreseeable future. Then I saw briefly a question about the geographical distribution.
Yes, widening. We are a widening organization.
Yeah, no,
team, so
I think that's a good question. Indeed, the STEP also will rely on, for example, on the cohesion funds, on the RRF. And indeed, part of the purpose of the STEP is precisely to ensure that we can still keep a level playing field even though we have, for good reasons, introduced this temporary state aid framework where arguably the member states that have more deeper pockets are in a more favorable situation. So precisely the point of using the EU budget to support this strategic sector is to give an opportunity to all countries in a kind of a balanced way to develop these technologies. And from that perspective, a lot of care has been taken in developing the proposal that we are discussing to achieve both, to increase the support for the sectors, but maintain respecting the goals, for example, of the cohesion programs. So, for example, even where it has been proposed to open up the cohesion programs to larger companies, it has been done so only in some countries which are relatively less developed, less advanced, precisely to try to make a balancing act. So I think the answer to the question is that there are mechanisms envisaged to ensure that the level playing field in the EU single market is maintained across the different levels of economic development of the different regions in the EU.
thank you so much. Maybe just one very last question, which is very technical, and apparently we have some really knowledgeable participants, and I cannot even read it out loud, but the main question is about deadlines. So if the deadline of all these STEP relevant programs will be prolonged in order to be able to finish, I suppose, the projects that would start under STEP. But I don't know, maybe you know more about this regulation.
No, I think one thing, I don't know, I haven't been able to read the whole question.
It's long, yes.
It's long, but I think one thing that I do know is that the proposal envisages the extending the deadline for the cohesion programs from the past cohesion programs by 1 year, because the argument is that we are inviting the member states to revise their current programs to increase the STEP content, so to speak. We are giving some incentives from them to do so, and we hope that they take them up. And therefore, their administrative capacity is likely to be locked up into this revision exercise, and we want to take into account that, and the legislation is proposing that therefore extra time is provided to close the previous programs, right? So that's what something that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure, to be honest, if I'm answering the question that is in the chat. If I'm not answering, maybe the question can be asked again. But certainly we are aware of the implications in terms of capacity in many member states to look at again reopen these operational programs, especially under cohesion, but not only.
Thank you so much. I think this was a great response as far as I could understand. And I just really want to say thank you to both of our speakers, because we learned a lot. This is a quite complex topic and a very new topic, even if it's using existing instruments. So thank you very much for also the slides. So can we share the slides maybe with the participants in a PDF format? That would be great, because then they can also just look up all this relevant information. Thank you for that. So we will send out a message to all the participants with then the presentation and the link where we recorded the whole event. And just one more thank you for all the participants also and to our speakers. And we hope to see you next time when we organize something similar.
Thank you for the opportunity, Agota, to explain a bit. It's always good. These exchanges is very useful. Sometimes there can be lots of misunderstandings.
That's true.
Yes.
It's always good to talk.
Yes, thank you also from my side. And as I said, we're open to this type of exchanges. These are one mission of my new task force. So we look forward, and we are open to suggestions that have been mentioned in the chat to get things to do more with what we have.
Thank you, David, and good luck for your team.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.